Hello again, YouTube world. I have another little project going on. Home stereo, vintage hi-fi. I went on the big auction site and I got myself what should be a very nice deal on a vintage Dynaco or Dyna PAS3X tube preamplifier. And it's just arrived, and let's look into it for several reasons, and let's see why I bought this thing and what I'm going to do with it. Okay, now as you've seen from other videos that I did this year, I bought a pair of Dynaco Mark IIIs, and those are my venture back into tube stereo. And I got those running real nice, sounding great, but I still had the itch to get a tube preamp, and I wondered what to get because I didn't really know much about these things. I don't have any old experience. I'm just a guitar amp builder, guitar builder who kind of wants to keep things as much tube bass as possible. So I wanted to get one of the classic circuits, maybe a Marantz 7 style preamp or Conrad Johnson style preamp. Those are the ones that were rattling through my mind, and I found a lot of made in China kits of those things, but kits that were a little too simple for me. They seem to have just a volume and an input selector, but no tone controls and stuff. A little too simple to have fun with. So all along the way, people kept recommending to me, you know what, you might as well just get the Dynaco PAS, because that works fine with the Dynaco Mark IIIs, and it's got all these features with tone controls and different types of inputs, and it sounds good, and you can work on it, you can get parts, and there's a lot of knowledge about it. So I eventually gave in to that I would have more fun with these than a made in China Marantz or Conrad Johnson clone that was just plug in and go, nothing to play with. Okay, so let's open this up and have a little further look in. Okay, so the bottom comes off and the top comes off, and I've never had one of these other than seeing pictures of these online. I've never owned one. I didn't know anyone that has owned one. I'm completely experienced. I don't even know what it sounds like, right? So this is a PAS3X, which is the version that is nice, because a lot of hi-fi folks don't like tone controls. There's some date codes here, that's what I'm zooming in on. It says December 10th, 1970, and below that it says June 10th, 1969. Why the difference in those two dates, I don't know. Anyway, so a few little bonuses that I'm keen to tell you about, or I'm led to believe. This is the PAS3X, which means that when the tone controls are centered, the tone control section of the circuit is out of the circuit, which is nice because a lot of hi-fi folks always say that tone controls always ruin the sound by filter, or always have a filtering effect on the natural recorded sound, right? So again, I earlier built EAR 834 phono preamp kit, so that's going to be going into this. Then this goes into the Mark IIIs. So in this tone setting, it's more transparent as far as tone control filtering goes. The other little bonus I was told is that this is a factory wired kit. So here and there you will see rivets instead of nuts and bolts, and that indicates a factory wired unit. So this is why I was keen and bought this particular one, because I kind of figured I'd preserve it. There are a lot of these available online that you can buy and bid on, where they've been modified to hell. Now those mods may be good and beneficial, but you never really know what you're buying. So this is actually a sort of a virgin, unmodified, unmaintained, factory wired unit. So this, to me, is just such a good starting point for everything. The clues to what makes a PAS3X distinguished from the earlier PAS3 and 3X. You see these pots here? There's two detents. You see them there? That indicates the tone controls that have that center bypass feature. And then these two capacitors here between the tone control and the circuit board. One of these must be replaced because they look different. Those are the clues that you've got a PAS3X, right? Again, I'm seeing here and here rivets instead of nuts and bolts, and those are factory wiring. So on some customer home wired units, these wires look different. The modifiers would change these to shielded wires, but this has the wires surrounded with a black ground wire. I don't know if that's going to help keep noise down, but that's one of, I don't know, that's just something I have to consider. This may be the original filter capacitor, and if it is, I definitely need to replace it because its time has come. But looking at it, I'm seeing the values are a little different to what I've seen on schematics. This one says 30, 20, 20, 10 Cornell double, and the originals I thought were all 20s, 20, 20, 20, 20. So this may be replaced. The other parts I definitely have to replace with these two yellow ones. Again, I think they're original, but they may not be. They may be replacements, right? And I have to change this selenium rectifier, which is part of the DC voltage for the tube heaters. So, again, this is factory wired and it's almost bone stock. I'm going to leave it that way, okay? So I'm going to do, let's call it 3 levels of service, okay? 3 levels. I'm going to clean the controls and the tube sockets, okay, with my very high quality deoxit D100. Clean all the contacts, all the switches, all the tube pins. That's level 1 of servicing. Next, level 2 of servicing would be changing the electrolytic capacitors, of which there are only this can, and I think these two little capacitors as well are electrolytics. That's level 2. Has to be done. And then level 3 would be going through and testing all the capacitors and resistors on the boards. There's 2 separate circuit boards, and there's a bunch of resistors and capacitors on the front controls. Test everything to make sure they're within spec. Anything that is not in spec, I will replace. So that would be the 3rd level of servicing in leaving this pretty much stock original circuitry. Again, I'm constantly reminded that the selenium rectifier, this square thing here, should be replaced with normal modern diodes, so that's a must. Okay, I've just noticed something really cool. The first date I showed you, which was on the bottom of the chassis here, says June 10th, 1969. That's the earliest date I see. Then above it I see December 10th, 1970. 6 months. No. How many? A year and a half later, right? I just realized inside here there are more dates. January 17th, 1978. April 12th, 1977. April 12th, 1977. So this may be an amp that was sent back to the factory for refurbishing. That's a huge guess on my part, but why would there be so many date stamps with all these different years? So this may have been replaced in 77 and 78, or this too. I don't know, I'm guessing. If you folks know anything, please message me in the comments and tell me what you may know. I mentioned before, there are 2 boards. This board is for the line section, and this is the phono section. Now, I could be a little wrong, but I think that some selections, these ones, special, tape, and phono, I could be wrong, but I think those go through that phono board. And these and these then go through the line board, which is this is the main clean amplification of the preamp. After this, the signal goes into the tone controls and then goes out to the outputs here, I believe. Okay, the schematics are a little confusing, especially on these things, these parts. And there's even a section in the original wiring manual where you can wire this special section differently to do different jobs. You could wire it as a copy of the phono, or you could wire it as a second copy of the tape head. But I read a little note that said the special in a factory wired unit is wired for 2 microphone inputs. Can you believe? So here and here are 2 separate microphone mono inputs, unbalanced, in the original factory wiring. But here this label actually says something else. It says, oh no, sorry, that's for special. Right, so the third one's number 3. Third pair, that's a microphone input, okay? Another little bonus, which is probably what made me go ahead and be the high bidder on this, is the tubes that came with it. This would be the stock original Dynaco 12X4. That's a rectifier tube, okay? But in here, we got a real little bonus. Okay, so here's that little bonus. Factory labeled, well, 2 of them are a quad of Telefunken diamonds. What is a Telefunken diamond? These are, well, I couldn't say how old they are, I just don't know. But these are made in West Germany, Telefunken 12X7s, which were stock in these amps. Can you believe such good stuff coming OEM? Now, 2 of them say Dynaco and made in West Germany, and 2 of them don't say Dynaco, but they have other numbers, and they've got the Telefunken diamond logo on them. Okay, so maybe I could tie this in with the different date codes on the amp and say that maybe the tubes were replaced a little differently over the years. Who knows? But this is a real score. As far as I know, these are as good as it gets for preamp tubes, 12X7s, and I couldn't ask for more. Dynaco used to put these in West German Telefunken 12X7s, and in the amps you would get Mullard or Mallard, however you pronounce it, EL34s in the ST70s, stereo 70s, and Mark 4s, I think, and you would get Genelex KT88s in the Mark 3s, which are, as far as power tubes, big power tubes are, that's as good as it gets. And I think they had 12 tongue sol 6550s too. That was the standard stuff they came with. Look at this from an old set of Mark 3s I had long time ago and got rid of. This is a Dynaco labeled Genelex KT88. As I said, that's as good as it gets. And that came stock in Dynaco amps. It's really good stuff. So I'm very pleased with this box full of stuff I got today. Okay, so I've cleaned these tubes pins with this just on the edge of a toothbrush, swabbing the pins and pushing them in and out of the sockets a few times. Looking over at this capacitor, which is doing all the power supply filtering, I really do not see any evidence of leakage. I'm trying to shine a flashlight, but it's not really helping. There's no leakage of any electrolyte flowing out of these pin areas here, which is usually something you see on old ones. So I have no reason to believe that this is not working perfectly. It's probably fine. I did have a replacement can for that. It looks like this, but shorter. This is a bigger one you'd use on the with the right values, but this is too tall. Doesn't fit into this chassis. But I had another one with the 20 and rated at 450, and that would have fit. Anyway, I have a feeling that this one is fine, and it's starting to look like this thing is entirely plug and play. I don't really need to make any changes. At this point, the only change I can even think of doing is to change these capacitors, or at least the selenium rectifier, for the regular diodes. So unfortunately for you viewers, this is not turning into a Dynaco PAS gut and rebuild project. It's turning into a Dynaco PAS3X got it and left it alone kind of project. I'm starting to do the cleaning. I've already done the sockets of the tubes, and I'm just gonna do the inside of the RCA. I have an RCA connector here. I'm just gonna put a little lube on that, right? And I'm just gonna jam in and twist this into each one, and that's gonna get it on to the relevant contact spots. And I'll just refresh the little drop on the edge, and that should be enough to clean the contacts and keep them clean. Okay, so I did the RCA jacks. Now I'm looking at the contacts on the inside here, the main selector switch, which is the most complex single part of the preamp probably. There's another simpler version down here. What I'm going to do, these look just like bigger versions of a Fender Stratocaster pickup switch. I'm just going to put a drop of this cleaning fluid on the contacts that make their way around when it's turned. And you can see, let me just move it a bit with my hand, right? You can see that piece moving there. I will put some cleaning fluid on all of those moving sections. This stuff is really good. I prefer it to the spray, which is very diluted, and I kind of feel that with this spray I'm kind of just getting stuff all over the place. This one I like to put the fluid exactly on the contacts where I want it. But of course for the pots and so on, the spray is the better thing. My technique for lubricating the pots, I have this, I want to get in there. I'm turning the knob all the way clockwise, so the wiper is up in this corner here. You might even be able to see it. There you go. You see that wiper there? I'm putting this onto that wiper. Just a drop or two. And then moving that all the way around in both directions, right? That should get a real nice coat of this on the carbon track, and it will not evaporate. It's going to stay there for a long time. Okay, on my way home from picking up this preamp, I actually stopped in my little local electronics store and I picked up these capacitors. These are suitable or even upgrade capacitors for these yellow ones here, which are doing the job of DC conversion for the tube heaters, changing from AC to DC. So these may be old. I again haven't checked to see if they're leaking like this one. This one looks good, but this is basically what the replacement would be, and it's actually an upgrade because it's 4700 microfarads. Nishikon, that's a good brand, and the original is 2200. So increasing, you can always increase capacitance without any negative consequences. But look at this. This is so small. The modern capacitors are so small compared to older ones, both in length and diameter, that even doubling these specs, doubling the capacitance, it's still a much smaller capacitor. So I'm not sure if I do take these out and the selenium rectifier, these are the replacement for that big selenium rectifier. Regular IN4007 diodes, 1 amp, 1000 volt. These will replace this. big black thing, and these would have replaced that yellow pair. So I would have built a little circuit board to house those things on, but again, I've got to check this to even see if these are worth replacing. I guess I probably would replace them. Let's start off by simply checking some voltages. I've plugged it in, switch it on, and I'm just going to test these 2 points here. My hand will stay steady, and we read 21.25. See where it stabilizes. Now, why does it say 21? Because tube heaters are usually 6.3 volts or 12.6 volts. And what Dynaco does in these, they run 2 tubes heaters in series. So that is, instead of normal guitar amp, hi-fi amp 6.3, 12 AX7 can be run 12.6, either AC or DC, if you use their pins 4 and 5 as the connections. So what they've done in these is connect those in series. So your voltage comes in pin 4, pin 5 over to pin 4, and then pin 5 over to the next polar voltage, and running those two, 12.6 by 2, 25.2. So why is it reading 21? Right? The story is that Dynaco actually ran these voltages a bit low. Instead of giving each one tube 12.6 for a total of 25.2 voltages, they ran them around 11 volts each. So if I measure the voltage actually at the tube sockets, I'm going to get 11 volts on each tube. That is supposed to preserve tube life, and whatever other reason I don't know about, right? So this selenium rectifier is one of the reasons now it's running a bit on the low side at less than 11 volts each. Okay, so by me replacing this, and I guess I'm going to replace these two, we bring the voltage back up to spec, which should be 11 volts or a little more, right? The closer we get to 12 volts, the happier I'll be. Allow me to illustrate the last point a little more clearly. Yes, there's almost 22 volts going to the tube heaters, but here we could measure the halves. There's a voltage doubler circuit making this happen. These are basically what the tubes will see, each tube will see, right? Because I'm measuring halves, each half of the voltage doubler circuit. So instead of 12.6, it's getting 10.7 here, roughly. And that's what we want to bump up to 11 or more. Okay, as I say, closer to 12 the better. Okay, having determined the existing heater voltages, we're going to measure all the voltages on this CAN capacitor. Those 4 terminals are the capacitors which comprise the entire power circuit. We're going to get everything we need to read from these pins. A quick word on these capacitors. Here some I have laying around. This one came with another Dynaco I bought and I didn't use it. I kind of screwed it up by messing up the ground tab, so I don't even know if I could safely mount this. But this here is quite new. These are old ones. This is from the 70s. As this one I took out of a 70s Fender Vibrochamp 2020. That's the exact specs that this uses. And this one came out of a silver tone. I don't know, or what, maybe this was in an Ampeg I refurbished. And this is 84 to 2020. So now look at this. These don't show any evidence of breakdown. There's nothing physically that indicates these don't work perfectly. Okay, I'm not saying they do work perfectly, but I took them out of working equipment. And usually why these are replaced are because this little area in the center, that little hole there, is usually bulged up and swollen, or around the base of any of these terminals there's some sort of fluid has leaked out and dried a bit, right? And none of these ever have shown me to actually be bad. These things kind of last forever. I think a lot of people change these before their time is really due. And I guess it's because they want to upgrade the values of capacitance. But I have my favorite amp is a Fender Princeton Reverb that has the original one just like this in it since 1977, and it works perfectly. It's never given any problems, and I'm even hesitant to replace the darn thing. Okay, so I'm checking these voltages on my meter over here, and I looked at the manual and I see that the voltages should be, the lowest one is about 210 and the highest one is about 405. I don't have the documentation with me, I have to print it out, but at least I kind of know the range. Let's start right here. I see, oh, if I switch on the unit it will work much better. Okay, so we switch on. Always remember, it works much better when you plug it in, and it works even better when you turn it on. Now the tube rectifier has to heat up a little bit before it starts conducting and making these voltages available on the meter. So we're looking up at the top left, and we start here. And what do we have? 398. So that might be the second highest one. Let's go clockwise. 328. Okay, that's the next step now. And we have 297. And then we have the lowest one of all, 196.5. So these are a little lower than the diagram indicates. As I said, we should be going from 210 to 405, and here we're going from 197 to 399. So we're kind of like 10 volts, 5 to 10 volts too low. Are we having a problem with the tube rectifier? I don't know. I'm not tempted to change the capacitor just to see if those voltages change with the new capacitor. Right? I might have to settle into the fact that that's the voltages we're going to have to live with. Here's the thing. This was built at a time when wall voltages were about 115. Maybe that's written on the back. Is it written on the back? Nah, it's not actually written on the back. But it's about 115, and today's voltages are about 122, 125. Actually, I'll check it now on the AC strip. So this should be higher than those voltages I just mentioned, not lower. So we may have a weak tube rectifier, I'm not sure. But not weak by much. We have a very small percentage of error we're seeing there. 5 to 10 volts out of that, not even 5% off. So we may have to live with that. Okay, I haven't printed this out yet, but just looking on the laptop, on this bottom right hand corner, those are the voltages that I was supposed to be getting over at the quad cap. So you see the 405 where we got 390 something, we got 190 something where the 210 was. Okay, so that's what I'm comparing to. Over here, this section is the area where those yellow capacitors are, and that funny big black square selenium rectifier. Actually, these two little parts with the little triangles are what that selenium rectifier are. Wherever my grandma got into in the circuit, right? And those 2000s capacitors are the yellow cylinders, right? So I should be able to make a little DIY circuit board that should be able to mount on the inside there with the new parts and do the job of what you see here. Shame on me if I can't make a little board like that for myself. Right, so I'm going to use this schematic, stare at it for a while, and come up with a little pattern of eyelet terminals that I could lay out onto a little phenolic board in preparation for putting parts on like that. So when I get back into the workshop, we'll see if I can't put this into reality with a little homemade rectifier board. Okay, so in my stash of building stuff, I have these blank tag boards which have terminals on them and mounting holes in the middle, and then I have these sort of old Marshall style phenolic boards which I can drill and put eyelets in whatever pattern I want. I think I'll work with this because I have these hanging around. I don't use them much, so I think I just need to cut a little section about 2 inches long that will go here, and I just need to stare at the schematic again and come up with a way that I can put these on. It's just a pair of capacitors and a pair of diodes, but it's a voltage doubler circuit, so I've got to make sense of that layout in relation to this nest of wires here. Wow, I got so confused trying to make this thing. Right, so I just want to cut off a little square here. This little hole here, I'll enlarge, and that will be going on this bolt over there. Okay, so I've laid out the 2 capacitors and the 2 diodes. These have to be joined together. These terminal 1 and terminal 5. I haven't done that yet. It's all just hanging on loose. I've got to make them neat, right? Right, so what comes in is so confusing looking at this and trying to interpret that to what I'm doing. But basically these blue wires with the wires from the transformer attached to them will be coming here and here, and that's a 12 volt AC input, right, which is at the junction of these two and at the junction of these 2 diodes. And what will be coming out, the positive side, negative side here of the 22 volts DC, rectified and smooth. So I'm gonna go over this 10 more times to make sure I've got it right, and then solder and neaten up these things and cut this board short. Okay, so further clarification and to demonstrate why I was a bit confused, this is the diagram of what this is doing, right? And the little confusing part is that there's 2 wires here, because there is the wire coming from the transformer, the 12 volt winding, and also this is going back to the tube, rectifier tube heater. So that was confusing me. And then there were two sets of wires here, because these are going to 2 different filament sections on the 2 different circuit boards, the line and the phono. So that's what's there, and I am doing that again with this. Okay, so I went over to my bandsaw and I trimmed that board off, belt sanded the edge so it's neat and square, and it's going to live there, right? So I've gotten rid of all the terminals I'm not using and drill the middle hole larger to mount up. So yeah, I could put these parts on as neatly as I can and solder them up. Alright, so that's the completed thing. Let's get this mounted up and then wired in. Right, so I'm disassembling the original DC rectifier block. Just disconnected the wires. This is the selenium rectifier, which everyone warns about and complains about. Right, so obviously this is a very early form of semiconductor that is not really happening anymore. This is a bracket that goes below that, holds the 2 capacitors in place. And this is the pair of capacitors. Again, I don't think anything is really wrong with these, but again, they're just a victim of update. These may be original, I don't know. I don't know that brand, Brel, I've never seen that. This may have been installed in some of these 1978 updates, who knows, but they don't actually look bad. Anyway, they're being replaced with the other ones that are rated twice as much capacitance. Right, so I've got to put a little spacer or another nut on here, because this has to live like up here, like that, somewhere along, some height there. I'll decide just now. Right, so I found a regular, I think it's 1024, I guess, nut there, just about an inch above the bottom, with a washer, not a particularly tight fitting washer, but it should be okay once everything is in place and squeezed up. There's no danger of the middle bolt shorting to anything else, because there's quite a distance all the way around to any of the other voltage stuff. So I'll have to put this on. No worries, I have my long nut driver. Oh, I had to undo that because I just forgot I had to put this wire across the back here. So I'm going to orient it this way, because the outputs, the DC outputs of these terminals, which are these ones here, black and red, 2 pairs. So let me fix this in place and get to that. Right, so there's my little board in place, all wired up. A little bit of heat shrink here and there where the cloth wires were fraying a bit. And I think I did pretty well for just digging around in workshop parts, not having to order and wait on anything. I was able to build this board in about an hour from scratch. So I think I did well there, as long as it doesn't go up in smoke or anything. I'm going to double check, well, check that a million times again before I fire this up. Okay, so that's the next thing. Going to fire it up and check those new DC heater voltages. Remember, before we were getting less than 11 volts to the tubes. So let's see what we get this time. Before switching on, I just had a little eureka moment. I thought, you know, oh gosh, I'm switching this thing on with this new rectifier setup. What's the story with the fuses? There's no fuse in this amp. So I just went looking through a real junk box, and the first thing I found was this inline fuse holder, right? A fuse goes spring-loaded and goes in here. So I can put a 1 amp fuse in here, which I think is just about right for this amp. And I could put it in to the circuit where there really should be one. Okay. Now this has switched and unswitched outlet, meaning anything that you plug in here would pass through this fuse if you put it directly in line with this power cord. If you wanted to fuse just this unit alone, you'd put it in line with this pair of wires here, which goes to the power switch. I'm not sure which one to I'm not sure exactly which part to put it in, because I have no intention of using these outlets to power anything else. And I don't want to make a mess of the wiring by, you know. So I'll just make my decision in a minute and put a fuse in place. Right, okay, look in here. This uses an ungrounded power cord and non-polarized plugs here. But the way it's wired, the left hand lugs here are the hot voltage junctions, and you can see here on this left one, it's this left one that goes to the power switch and comes back live to continue to these switch outlets. Okay, these are like if you wanted to power your power amps, when you switch this on, all 3 units, this and the 2 power amps would switch on, or you know, 1 stereo. Okay, so here if you look a little close, these black cloth wires here are to go to the primary of the transformer for this unit. So if I break the connection between the black cloth wire on the left and the plug, and I put my little fuse arrangement in between those two, I would have a fuse for this unit itself and not in line with any of the plugs. So I'm going to break that connection and put this in series with it. Well, so much for my factory stock setup. we have all these mods in place now, but now I can put this 1 amp fuse in line and just tuck it up in this area here. I'll find a spot for it, maybe put a little tie wrap to hold that nylon fuse holder here. And again, it's in line with where the mains power after the switch goes into the transformer primary winding. Okay, so this fuse holder is perfectly tucked up in this corner here, but I'm feeling a little dumb because I just realized I could have fed it through and had it live in this area here, somewhere here. But, you know, I'm kind of moving quickly, so I somehow left it on the bottom, but that's fine. That's fine, and it's in the AC area. It's not up where the DC clean voltages are, you know, tucked right down in the corner there. So I think that's a good spot. Okay, so it's plugged in, I'm switching on, and no fuse blew. So let's proceed. Okay, so again, I'm gonna let that heat up a bit, let the tube rectifier get up and running. And we're looking for 22 volts, hopefully a little more, when I touch this section here. And let's see what we have. Yeah, 23, that's 11.5 volts per tube. That's perfect. It's getting a little higher. That's so good. Little higher than the original 11 volts. Right? That's perfect. So my new little board really works. How wonderful. I'm proud of myself. Yeah. Just over 11.5 volts on each of the preamp tubes. That's a good score. Let's double check those high voltages we checked earlier. Okay, flipped over and switched on. Ground clamp in place, and I'm just going to wait a little bit for that tube rectifier to heat up to full conduction. And again, the highest one was supposed to be around 405, and the lowest one was supposed to be 210, if I remember correctly. Imagine I'm working on this thing off of memory, not even using the schematic. Right, so this one should be up. It's a little high now. It's gone up to 436. Why did that happen? You saw the difference. Why do we have a difference? I do not know. Next one. 402. 401. This is the lowest one. 305. Well, that's too damn high. That's supposed to be... It was 196 earlier. So what's going on? This is weird. Just double checking back the same way I went around. Wow. So for some reason, changing out that selenium rectifier setup, all the stuff in here, has drastically eased up the current pull, and the voltages have risen. This is strange. This is strange. Now the higher voltage is making me a bit alarmed, but the truth is that's the kind of correct voltage in relation to the original specs, because remember I said that we should get about 405 when the line voltage was 115. Now it's, well, I'm going to check the line voltage now, but we're looking at about everything that I measure now is about 10% higher than it should be, which makes sense for the increased line voltage. So let's check that line voltage. Whoa, did I just get a surprise? I'm checking the line voltage on one of these same little sockets here. It's 115, 116. This is way lower than I expected. I expected this to be like 122. So I now don't have a reason why these voltages are so high. I can't figure it out. it's higher by 10%. Why? I don't know. All the tubes are plugged in. If the tubes weren't in the sockets, there wouldn't be that current draw and the voltage would go a bit high. So I don't know what's going on. Okay folks, all my fault. Remember I just mentioned that if the tubes weren't in, they wouldn't be pulling current and the voltage would go high. Well, I just flipped it over and realized none of the tubes are lighting up. I'm like, what the heck? I didn't mess with any of the board wiring. And I just looked here and I could see, if you look real close at this joint here, I did some crappy soldering. Oh, look at me. I'm so lame at this, man. Cold solder joint. So let's redo that and my tubes should light up and those voltages should go back where they should. Okay, so I heated the heck out of that solder joint and that tab finally got a better, nice wet joint going, and I checked all the others too to make sure they weren't going to give a problem. So I switched off the pilot light temporarily. Well, I took out the bulb just so I could see if the tubes are lighting. And I can't really see on camera that they're lit, but putting my hand on them, yes, I feel them warming up. Before they were ice cold. Can you believe my surprise? Could you imagine my surprise? I mean, right, so these are warm. Okay, so let's flip it back over and check those high voltages again. Okay, I'm back on again, pilot light back in place, and let's check this first voltage and see what we got. Ooh, 396. So that's pretty much back where it was earlier today. Let's check the lowest one. It was supposed to be 210, 198. So it'd be like 3, yeah. So this is back where we were earlier. So if that's the consistent voltages we have, so be it. We're a little bit lower than we should be. And our corrected heater voltage is a little higher than stock, right? Because it's originally 11 per tube and we're now up to 11.5 per tube, which I think is good. So this is ready to zip up and go into my stereo and be listened to. Now the last thing for the moment is that this wasn't the cleanest front. The labeling is perfect except for the one label here, power off and on. But I'm pretty happy with it otherwise. But it did have a bit of a yellowish, nicotine-ish appearance, right? So I put a little bit of car upholstery type cleaner, which I find is a very good polish. And I'm just swabbing off. You can see these sort of yellow halos below where the knobs were. And this stuff is a sort of like an Armor All copy. It's been a very good polish, and it's not messing with the labels. So I'm gonna just pick away at this for a little while and do a best of a cleaning as I could. Right, so I did like 2 applications of that cleaner. No mess on the labeling, didn't affect it in any way. And I took the knobs off and I soaked them in a little bit of degreaser, you know, purple blaster kind of thing. And just a little bit of elbow grease with a rough rag to get them a little bit shined up. And that's looking nice. Before it was kind of yellow, nicotine-ish, almost like the Marantz pale gold faceplate look. So this is much better than before, right? So I'm going to take this inside, it's going to get hooked up. Right, so I'm back in this room for a bit. Got the old 80s Formica wood grain. Anyway, I have CDs and a couple of things in here, CD players and tape players. That's right, so I've just set up this PAS here for the moment, very temporarily. This is the EAR clone I built a couple of weeks ago. So I'm going to hook up now just this turntable through the AR into this. Not bothering with the phono selection on this. I wish I had more line settings, to be honest. These are line, and these are the low level phono and tape head. Okay, so So I'll be setting up my EAR and phono, EAR and CD player into these two. And of course, it's nice to have these old cabinets on wheels to deal with this rat's nest of wiring in the back. You know the scene. Okay, so this is a bit of a primitive interim setup. I put my phono EAR into here, CD player into here. But this now, the problem is I have a subwoofer system set up. This pair is going out to my Dynaco Mark IIIs. But I have a rack mounted amp down there that goes to a pair of subwoofers. The Mark IIIs go to these Acoustic Energy AE1s. Good stuff. But what am I sending out to this subwoofer? So this is the tape output, which I think may do duties for sending into the rack mount subwoofer amp. I'm gonna have to double check that real quick to see if those specs are okay. Okay folks, things have gone well. I've just stacked it here temporarily on top of the EAR clone. And I kind of ratched a bit. I had to do a bit of a splitter to send the signal out from this to my Dynaco Mark IIIs, which are driving these acoustic energies. I also sent it to a rack mount amp, which drives those subs. It's not ideal. I have some mods to do. Probably put in an external unit to properly split those signals without messing up each other's impedances. So I've been listening, I've been jamming some Who Quadrophenia, jamming some Bob Marley, jamming some AC/DC, some James Taylor, a lot of good stuff. And of course I can't really demo because YouTube has all these copyright things, but I don't think I'll get in trouble for playing this. Thank you for watching. Until next time.